Good morning and welcome back to Margin. This morning we're going to talk about how to manage your finances in your 20s. So let's jump right into it. So when it comes to the next benchmark number 3, this one will probably be the most surprising, the most shocking of all of them. But as a recap, we have looked at living within your means. We have looked at operating from a plan to spend and building an emergency fund. We have looked at limiting and eliminating your largest expenses and using that to then save and invest for your future. Now, when you are building in these key components, it is important that you also build in a system of what your why is. What is your driving factor that is bigger than yourself? Which brings us to this next benchmark on giving. So going through the process of determining a why around this will enable you to limit your expenses, increase your saving and investing, but then be able to do what I find to be the most fun aspect of all, which is giving. I believe that giving must be a part of everyone's financial plan. This is because giving takes the focus off of you and makes you aware of the needs of those around you and in your community. Now, you can give of your time by actively being involved in a cause that matters to you, but I would also look at this from a standpoint of your abilities and talent that you have a unique opportunity to give back with, as well as looking at resources from a standpoint of being diligent to give to those causes, to those organizations, and maybe even to those people that matter most to you. So this may sound like a strange component as a foundational benchmark to managing your personal finance, especially in your 20s. But I believe that money makes you more of what you already are. So you may be very generous and will end up becoming more generous as you build wealth. But you may also actually struggle with being stingy, and you may actually need to train yourself to be more generous. So you'll find that generosity is actually life-giving and does so much more for you than you may realize. So spending the time to figure out how to best exercise the generosity muscle that you have will reap great dividends, whether that's something that's natural for you or not. So you may have heard of two popular sayings. The first one is that the most selfish thing that you can do is to give. The second one being that it is better to give than to receive. Both of which are true because it does so much for you. So as a funny analogy, think about what ways you may naturally operate as Scrooge McDuck, hoarding and greedy and someone who has lost joy because they're so focused on getting more, instead of looking at ways that you may be able to give and the ability to gain perspective in order to build a compelling why for what you are actually working for in the first place. So what is it that pulls at your heartstrings, your so-called heartstrings? What is it that bothers you and inspires you to act on behalf of others, on behalf of a specific cause, or on behalf of a specific mission that is much bigger than yourself? So I started giving consistently back in college, and I distinctly remember that I would worry about money less when I was consistently giving. It was almost like I was letting go of being over controlling or being too controlling, and therefore allowing a level of trust to set in that it was all going to work out if I was making a priority of what mattered most to me to support. So once you go through the process of actually defining this, set aside a fixed amount that will be used specifically to give back. Separate it in a different account until you figure out that cause that makes the most sense to give back to. But whether it's buying groceries for someone who's in need, whether it's repairing their vehicle, or giving to an organization like a church or a nonprofit, or maybe even giving to an emergency response organization of some kind, or being a part of a grant or scholarship program, but figuring out what it is for you and making sure that it aligns with your core values and what you ultimately want to be known for, what is part of your legacy that you want to leave behind. Now, an immediate response that I typically get when I make this recommendation to people is something that you're probably thinking as well, which is, I don't know if I make enough in order to give, or I don't know if I have the time to give back, or maybe I just have too much debt in order to give back. So let me remind you of a phrase that you've probably heard before, which is you make time for what matters to you. In my words, I state that you build margin for what is important to you. Now, what's important to you has to be defined by you, and what makes you who you are should be carried out in a way that you are leading your life, that you are leading your life in a way that is in alignment with what you want to ultimately be, and you are building margin for what actually matters most for you. Now, if you're struggling through the process of figuring out how much to give, that's less of the issue. I would just start with a fixed percentage, something like 10%, that is a large enough amount to make a difference and actually be planned for, be planned into your plan to spend. But I believe that what you will receive in return will be so much more than what you feel like you're giving up in the time being. Now, if that sounds like a lot, you can even start with a lower percentage and scale up, build up from there. But there's a purpose in this. It's building in the perpetual habit or a system of habits in giving that will ensure that you are making a priority of this, and that this is actually something that's part of your financial plan, no matter how much you give. But figuring out how to make this a part of your plan, and then remembering that it's much easier to establish these types of things, these types of habits early on than actually having to retrain yourself later on in life when you have obligations that may not allow for you to be as generous as you want to be. So my call to action today comes down to including giving in your strategic plan based on what really matters to you. You can always tier this up over time, but starting somewhere will make all the difference in your journey. If this information is helpful to you, please do like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're reminded to come back on a daily basis and improve in managing your personal finances. Thank you for your time, enjoy your day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.